Okay, so I'm going to see if I can quickly here respond to ContraPoints. That was Nick who posted up a video called Is the Internet Making Us Dumb? And I really enjoyed that video response. I thought it was really great. There's so much stuff in there. And I guess I wanted to say a couple things. First, I'm not planning on leaving the tubes. I'll still be around. I'm just trying to understand it. I think it was a little bit of a lamenting video, but it wasn't a throwing in the towel. I appreciate everyone coming into my emotional rescue or something like this, but it wasn't really like that. It was more, I guess, a concern over some of the issues that I appreciate the way that Nick had brought them up. And so I want to see if I can follow out some of that real quickly. One is that the passage that Nick had cited from Plato, right, I think that's from the Phaedrus, the that's probably the most cited line in media ecological research. I mean, tons and tons of people. See, because within the Media Ecology Association, there are those who are very pro-technology. They're on the Kurzweil end. They're on the movement towards cyborg. And then there are the sort of Luddite people, the people like Jacques Ellul, people like Neil Postman, who are a little bit more reserved and concerned about advancing technology. And then, of course, there are people in the middle ground. But that line is always brought up as this sort of exemplar of, there was a time when people had these great fears over what writing would do to memory and to the changes in understanding of knowledge and wisdom. And, in some way that did happen. And in another way, I think it did about knowledge and wisdom, not so much about memory. I mean, memory ended up being a little bit of a wash there. I mean, actually, if you go look at the work of Milman Perry or particularly Albert Lord, he wrote a famous book called The Singer of Tales, and he went to some holy oral places and he did audio recordings of some of these classic tales that had been sung for centuries in these peoples. And what they found was that there's mnemonic devices of rhythm and rhyme, and there's sequences, and the notion of verbatim was introduced. See, the problem here is that oral peoples don't have a notion of verbatim in the way that literate peoples do. And so when people would say, well, it's the same song, it's the same narrative, sameness has this issue of, is it the identical, the verbatim, or is it a structurally similar one with, it has that rough characteristic. So that would be one of the things about the memory. I think as far as this issue about what are the changes. I mean, so much of what Nick said there, I just so agree with. Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows, is certainly a book that people want to see, and I'll see if I can provide some links to some of these. But I want to talk about some things that I think Nick didn't talk about and see if I can't bring out why I think these are perhaps more significant. And the thing that I really want to rally behind and really amplify is the end of Nick's video, where he says, look, maybe something is being lost. And it's not about turning off the internet. It's not about unplugging and going out in the woods and howling. No, it's about learning balance. It's about realizing the shortcomings of information without purpose. It's about questioning what a technology can do if one doesn't have self-discipline and goals, and if one isn't really up to something, if one doesn't want to create a great life and hasn't set out as on a mission to bring that about, all the information in the world isn't going to help. See, information itself isn't some magic wand, but I think people have turned it into this cult-like panacea that all they need is just more information. It's like they don't want to realize that tons of people, when they have the right information and know what to do, can't be depended on to do it. I mean, that's part of the problem. Okay, let's go back though. I want to get to this issue that Nick just really hit at toward the end about, maybe people should get up to the library and study. And your concerns about some of your professors, I guess I want to echo and share. I don't know if, my students know me, I think, very differently than anyone here on the tubes do. In my classes, I am animated, I will leap around, I will do gestures, and, I'm a little bit all over the place. And I do want multidisciplinarity. I want people reading in all kinds of fields, and I do want them to be able to be competent in looking at communication phenomena, symbol systems in the realms of mathematics and in music and in literature and in poetry. And what is a word in all of these different contexts, or what is a symbol? And so the general strategy, I celebrate what you're doing, Nick. I mean, I think the point of moving from, you sit around and you have 5 or 10 books in your lap, and you read one chapter from this book, and then you read another chapter from another book, and then you read another chapter from another book, and you look for synthesis and patterns and connections. Go look at Tyler Volk's book, Meta Patterns, or go look at Anthony Wilden's book, System and Structure, or The Unspeakable by Steven Tyler. These are guys who have done these meta-level synthesis of whole bodies of work. It's mind-blowing, some of the stuff that people have put together. And that capacity is right. But depth doesn't mean, for me, it doesn't mean this boring, read every book cover to cover and become some pin-headed little specialist who, maybe that was the problem of the book age. The book age led to over-specialization and to a kind of myopia between, little people who are experts in their area haggling over, what fits on a pinhead. Well, I mean, to that point, it does seem very stupid. And the question of what is the point of knowing anything, well, I hope that it's more than to get a job. It's important for people to be able to learn some things to get a job, but it should be about helping them solve the world's problems, to get in there and to be the kind of problem solver to face the 21st century and all that's included in it, but to also help humanize them, help them grow in their inwardness, in their capacity to reason, in their capacity to, I guess, deal with their own past, to navigate their own future. I mean, there's so many things. But okay, so I think some of the things that I wanted to talk about that maybe you didn't talk about in your video, that partly relates to the media ecology tradition, but it's that I think power and elites, the elites, they garner power through literate strategies, and that literacy is never going to go away. Literacy is always going to be there, and the wealthy and the ruling and the powerful are always going to surround themselves by elites, by people who are highly literate, by people who can not simply access the information, but be able to draw inferences from the information, determine what a good source is from a bad source, and then be able to reason from the information that was given. Somebody posted on one of my previous videos, and it was such a, again, it's one of these snarky, dumb, self-congratulatory comments, but the person posted, look, in the books, the person draws the dots for you. They connect the dots for you. But, in the electronic media, you have to connect the dots yourself. And I thought, this is so dumb. First, this is a book metaphor. But even that, it's like, no, books don't always draw the dots for you. It makes it seem like it's shameful and or embarrassing to be getting your ideas from books because it's all just laid out there. Whereas in the internet, it's this struggle to put it together. No, this is the exact opposite of what I would say the case. The truth is, if you go grab a book by, say, Spinoza, or if you're going to go grab a Kant book, or why don't you go grab Being in Nothingness or Being in Time? This is for the person who left that snarky little comment. Why don't you go grab that, or go grab Kierkegaard's Concluding Unscientific Postscripts to Philosophical Fragments, and just shake the ideas like they're rocks in a shoebox and just gobble them down. So you can't get them that way. I mean, the truth is that you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to struggle. You will have to become someone in order to get those texts. You're not going to be able to rely upon the author who has already connected the dots. You're going to have to rival that thinker thought for thought as it progresses in order to become able to understand what they're talking about. It's on the internet where people are always shaking a finger at people who aren't making themselves more intelligible. They put such a demand upon the sender over here in this realm. We make it seem like people who aren't understandable to anyone who's utterly unfamiliar with the topic on first pass is mystifying. They're speaking in all kinds of technical language. They're trying to hide it. We make it seem like information that can be made democratically available is somehow hiding something, and we accuse people of obscurantism and all kinds of other over-intellectual BS because we want the specialist to be impossible. We want to believe that anything, except of course in the sciences, can just be understood by anyone. I think a lot of people are very naive about language, communication, symbol systems, the history of communication technologies. We could go into all of that. Okay, here are some of the things. Again, I'm trying to get to, Nick, here. I know this is taking a long time. I apologize. I think some of the insights are that, yeah, you're dead on. It's about democratization. But here's the killer. It's that it's about learning how to read and how to listen. See, I think that when, see, the model is backward, I think, is my sense of it, is that the model is backward. So many people want to be influential. They want to influence other people, but they don't really think about who has influenced them. Who are they already listening to? What traditions, beliefs, backgrounds do they have, and are they already perpetuating? Instead, they take this American cliche of I'm an individual thinking for myself, and then from there they just try to commercialize themselves. See, the difference, one of the key differences between book culture and the internet culture is commercialization and advertising at every turn. See, part of the problem is that what's competing for your attention here on the internet are the encroachments of advertisement, and not only is advertisement there at every turn, but people, in order to break through, in order to break out of the anonymity because of the information overload, they have to turn themselves into a commercial. They turn themselves into a kind of commodity or a brand or a product name, and they're much more interested in franchising themselves, in getting themselves spread out and distributed, than they are in making sure that they have been trained and listened and, have really cultivated themselves. So it's much more of a sender orientation than a listener orientation. See, when you read, I think you put yourself in the humble position of wanting to study someone who hopefully had devoted their lives to thinking about an issue, and then over a course of a couple of year period, they struggled to articulate something that they hoped people could one day be up to earning that. I think of something like Alfred Korzybski's work. One of the books that I just finished yesterday was this book, Korzybski's biography. It's a fat tome. It's a great book, but and Korzybski himself, right, is writing these massive books that demand multiple readings and a digestion over a long period. Whereas YouTube, the internet, it's filled with spontaneous, unscripted. I mean, look at this. That's me right here ranting right now, sort of just talking off the cuff. It's unrehearsed. Now, part of that's nice. We could say that spontaneous everyday life has a kind of reality that's maybe truer than books. Books, you get to niggle figgle and fool around and make the wording just right so that it seems like it's going to be perfect, but then when you try to get to the real world from there, it just somehow never fits. The real world is somehow looser, sloppier, not as coherent and inconsistent as the book would make it seem. I think this is part of the problem of some very successful philosopher novelists. There are people, like, they don't need to be mentioned, but we can all guess who I'm talking about, who their novels allow people to see a kind of order that then they think the world is really like that. Well, no, you're judging the model on it being simple enough for you to comprehend, not on it accurately depicting the facts. Okay. Again, people end up turning themselves into a kind of commodity or a brand. And I think it has to do with the information overload, the commercialization, the onslaught of advertising, and of the many ways that branding and marketing, just as orientations, have entered into the world, and they're bedfellows of the new media. I mean, you can't separate the new media from advertising in a way that books seemed to have a kind of integrity about ideas, that they weren't unending commercialization. Okay, that's one of the real, I think, big differences. The other is that this goes back to a classic distinction between that is made by Marshall McLuhan, in that many of the electric media, like ones that have voice and sound like this, that has sort of animation, looks like I'm talking. I mean, even though you're listening to a recording, it feels like we're interacting right now or in some way. And it's a cool media. That is, it allows for participation and fill in. It has multiple senses, where a hot medium like print for McCluhan is well suited for its one sense, just this sense of sight, and it gives a completed package, and it gives actually what he calls minimal participation. And when he's saying that, he's trying to get at, I guess, the degree to which people, let me get that here. That is somebody here on Skype. I'm gonna quit that. It's as if people they can let the text do the thinking for them. Now, we want to be somewhat careful here, and I want to be very careful about it. When I say that the text is hot, okay, McCluhan says that a hot medium allows for acting without reacting, makes surgery possible. And so the text as a hot medium allows for a kind of detachment and a reflective thought about things, even if it's something of great concern. Whereas something like this, it's almost like face-to-face interaction where action and reaction are simultaneous. He says the electric media, like television, it has basically reacting without acting. So if you have face-to-face, which is acting and reacting at the same time, and then the text, which makes acting without reacting, these new media make reacting without acting. And what do you react to? Other people's reactions. So much of what people react to is facial expressions. A lot of the videos, people partly are getting their sense of what they think, what they believe. Do they like this person? Do they not? Largely on facial expressions. I mean, we don't want to think of it that way, or we don't want to believe it. I think that the part of our reasoning, that book sensibility says, no, we can't be using just visual information of how someone looks to be judging them and their ideas and everything else. But no, we actually are. It's one of these just major factors, and it's very, very odd. Okay, so I want to get at one last thing, and then I'll let this go. I realize that it's going way too long, and I'm very sorry for that. One last thing is that when we're in a situation like this, it's pre-recorded. I've already said what I'm going to say, so it's not like you can interrupt me mid-speech and correct me, and we can't really have a dialogue. So it's already pre-packaged. But what's going on is, as I'm speaking, you hear my words, and you hear my words as if they're my words, and they are. They're me. It's me over here saying it. But you think to yourself, do I agree with that or do I disagree with that? And so you're already positioned over against me. And you're sort of saying, would I agree with that? Would I not agree with that? Even if you come to agree with me or if you come to disagree with me, all along it was my ideas that you seem to be agreeing with or disagreeing with. Now, when you move to books, books are interesting. I mean, books also have this sense of you have to earn the ideas, and it can be a struggle, and you will have to, the book oftentimes feels more other than a face-to-face interaction. So it's like a thing there, and it really takes something to get it, especially a dated book from a different culture, a different time. It can be very challenging to learn to know what an other means by their words, right? To try to get into their worldview from their language. But what happens is, although the other has left the words, the written words, for you to give life to breathe life into, the other can't speak except by you animating the dead. That is, you give life to the text and you articulate it, you give it breath. And so even though the other is an other, the other becomes self as you try to learn what the other has said. That is, your learning what the other has said is actually involved in speech production. You have to articulate in various ways the words that the other has left. And in that sense, you're implicated in the ideas. You come to decide whether or not you agree or disagree once you've already said the ideas that the other wanted you to think. See, I mean, a text is very different in that you have to engage in speech production in order to engage a text. Whereas when you listen, you really can just use your ears. And in fact, throat surgeons, right? The throat surgeons will advocate, or they will tell their patients to not read for a certain period after throat surgery, because you move your throat. I mean, you're actually engaged in speech production activities while you read. Even if your eyes are doing it very quickly and very subtly, there's a speech production that's going on. And I think the boundary between self and other is potentially, it's rubbed a little bit thinner, and or there's more capacity for genuine opening to history and growth and cultivation of self through text than through dialogue with others. And again, I'm not trying to suggest that dialogue with others is important, that you don't want both. It's a both and. You certainly want access to the material, and you want access to books, but ultimately it's about being a person who has, goals and aspirations, and is cultivated self-discipline, and really is trying to take the world by storm. I mean, that's part of it. But yeah, I think it is to recognize the relative strengths and weaknesses of what texts can do, what video can't do, and some of the, I guess, the real, again, the strengths and weaknesses of both of them, and then to see if you can't navigate between that, and for your own benefit, but ultimately for the betterment of society and future generations who are going to have to enter into the world that's now getting underway. Okay, thanks. Appreciate your video.